the great equalizer. You know, your movie is right there next to the, you know, $100 million Terminator 2, and it's going to cost the person, you know, $2, just like, you know, any other movie.
In the meantime, the big time intervened at, of all places, Disney, with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Every decision that I made, you know, had to be, you know, I had to go and convince them, and had these long meetings. I remember one meeting we had where there was literally 30 people sitting around a table, and we're going through it, you know, storyboard by storyboard, shot by shot, to see if we really indeed could do this film for the budget that we said we could. So it was a very, very high pressure situation. What happened was that my blood pressure got out of control. And one of the meetings that I had with one of the presidents at Disney, blood started shooting out of my nose. I mean, literally, it was like a scene from The Exorcist. It was like, like projectile, you know, nosebleed, I guess is what you'd call it. And I mean, he had to like jump back in his, you know, out of his seat. And I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "That's pretty serious stuff. You know, that's what that's saying is that something's about to blow, and if it blows a little higher up, you're going to be out of commission. You know, this could be the end of you." And said, you know, in no uncertain terms, that I had better take a break, you know, and not do this movie.
Gordon turned from H.P. Lovecraft to Lovecraft's chief rival in the canon of American horror literature with his 1991 film The Pit and the Pendulum, based on the classic tale by Edgar Allan Poe. The Poe story had been filmed several times before, most notably in 1961 by Roger Corman. Gordon's version was no mere remake. In fact, it was unlike any previous version that had gone before, except in one area. It too was made on a very tight budget. This posed a tremendous challenge for Gordon, who wanted to shoot the film in period and on location in Italy. The Pit and the Pendulum is Gordon's most ambitious film to date. Many also consider it to be his best.
The Pit and the Pendulum was a pretty fine movie. I was sorry that didn't get more exposure.
Pit and the Pendulum is also, it's a very grim film, but it has moments of humor that help offset some of the unpleasantness in the film. It has some great over-the-top performances in it.
In it, he uses the witchcraft trials of the Spanish Inquisition to comment on similar abuses of power today.
Amnesty International asked us, you know, if we would put a statement on the film saying that all of the tortures that are practiced in this movie are still being practiced throughout the world, which we ended up not doing because we felt that the movie was not intended as a statement about torture as much as it was a, you know, an adaptation of an Edgar Allan Poe story. But the cooperation of Amnesty International was extensive and very helpful. You know, and horrifying, I have to say. And I felt that my feeling was that as long as we were truthful in the way that we presented it, that we would be getting the message across that Amnesty International wanted.
That movie was about someone in a position of power who's sick, not about the glories of torture.
The things that people do to each other are far worse than any monster movies that you can create, you know, that the human beings are the true monsters.
Perhaps the film's most satisfying quality is its clear demonstration that Stuart Gordon is a growing, evolving fearmaker of considerable power.
In the industry, he has a reputation for being an actor's director, which means that he communicates well with actors. He's, you know, he's very good at drawing their best work from them, and he's very good at listening to what they have to say. He views the actor as being the expert on their character.
It's a nice blend of keeping things loose, and yet when the work has to be done, you know, everyone pretty much keeps keyed into it. Everything is very well thought out and organized. Of course, I mean, you know, with movies, there's always a problem that no one anticipates.
Witch hunting of a different form was one of the serious elements of Jack Finney's classic science fiction parable, The Body Snatchers. Published in 1953, Finney's novel was filmed twice as Invasion of the Body Snatchers, first in 1956 and again in 1978. After The Pit and the Pendulum was completed, Stuart Gordon and his longtime writing partner, Dennis Paoli, began developing a script for another big-screen version of Finney's story.
A sequel to a remake is what we thought we were working on. Until they realized that it had been so long since the remake that the idea of doing a sequel to that remake didn't make a lot of sense, and so it was a second remake.
The tongue-in-cheek setting for the new film would not be a small town or a large city, but a remote military installation where the human takeovers by the cold, emotionless pod people from outer space would go largely unnoticed, until it was too late. Gordon's version would be called Body Snatchers, and its budget would be substantially larger than he was used to. The project seemed to be yet another bid by Gordon to broaden his audience beyond the fear film cultists and into the mainstream. In the end, the film was made by others, when Gordon turned instead to another cautionary science fiction project called Fortress to achieve the same goal.
Fortress came up at the same time. It's very typical in this business that everything happens at once. Either nothing is happening or everything is happening. And so I chose to do Fortress instead of Body Snatchers.
I think someone told him, you have to go out and you have to show that you can direct bigger budgeted movies. You have to show that you can direct a $10 million movie. Okay. So he went out and he did Fortress.
His picture of the Fortress, which he did in Australia, has extraordinary camera work. I mean, really, comparable to Orson Welles, I think.
Fortress is probably the best futuristic prison movie out of a number of other futuristic prison movies that I've ever seen.
The reason that I chose Fortress was that I found Fortress to be a situation where I was given a lot more control, and that rather than doing a second remake of an existing, project, which I had, even though I liked the original premise and I liked our script very much, the idea of starting something new I found much more challenging and interesting.
The story of a man imprisoned in a futuristic hellhole because he and his wife have produced more than the one child allowed them by their hardline government. Fortress starred Christopher Lambert and Gordon regular Jeffrey Combs.
He took a story and he gave it dramatic content and impact that originally was not there.
With the success of Fortress behind him, Stuart Gordon returned once more to his cinematic roots and to Italy, to film his most outrageous exercise in traditional horror with a modern edge since Reanimator. The film was called Castle Freak.
The story is a very simple one, but I think it's a very classic horror movie idea. The story is about an American family that inherits a castle in Italy and then ultimately discovers that someone has been left behind in one of the dungeons. And in a sense, this freak who has been so abused, when he is freed, the only thing he knows is abuse, has to carry this out on other people. Jonathan Fuller had to undergo 6 hours of makeup every day to play this character. I mean, the makeup is extensive and very effective. But he always idolized Lon Chaney, it turns out. And so he really saw this as a way to kind of take on a modern Lon Chaney kind of role.
I never saw a tripod the whole time that we were shooting Castle Freak. It was either handheld or a Steadicam.
It's got the feel, the claustrophobia of a real horror picture, and it is. It's a great horror picture.
Castle Freak is really an attempt to go back to an old-fashioned, hide under the seat horror movie.
Now an American family.
Welcome to Castle Riley, lady.
Will inherit a legacy of evil.
They say the castle is haunted.
And a master of modern horror. Will unleash his most terrifying creation. Stuart Gordon's Castle Freak.
There's somebody else here! There's somebody in the castle!
There was a madman in there, but my family is in danger.
animators Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton in Stuart Gordon's Castle Freak.
I hope Stuart Gordon gets bigger budgets and is allowed to direct some movies that get the right attention and theatrical releases, because he really deserves it.
I've got 3 daughters, and I'll say, you know, once upon a time there was a princess, and they'll say, can I be her? And that, I think, is really what an audience member asks when he comes into a movie. Who can I be? And can I, you know, and you have to give them a character, a protagonist that they can like and that they can feel for and that they can sympathize with. And I think once you're able to do that, then it becomes very easy to scare someone.
Stuart, that's what he's really good at, is telling a story. I mean, ultimately, that's what it's all about.
When Stuart Gordon's first film, Reanimator, was released, he opted for distributing the film unrated rather than submitting to the editorial requests of Hollywood's self-censoring body, the Motion Picture Association of America. But in subsequent years, Gordon allowed the MPAA to dictate the contents of the released versions of his films because he was striving to carve a niche for himself in the mainstream. Now that his place in the mainstream is secure, he has returned to his original strategy. From now on, he says, his shockers will be released exactly as he made them, with all those distinctive Stuart Gordon touches horrifically intact.